In this video we are going to create private network access to connect an Azure Synapse Workspace with an Azure storage account and an Azure SQL database. To reproduce the recipe, you will need an Azure subscription, an Azure SQL Server Database, an Azure storage account ADLS v2 and a Synapse Workspace. According to Wikipedia, network security consists of the policies, processes and practices adopted to prevent, detect and monitor unauthorized access, misuse, modification, or denial of a computer network and network accessible resources. In the public cloud, some systems are accessible by default from the internet. Cloud-based network security should be applied to minimize the chances that malicious actors can access, change, or destroy information. Synapse Analytics is a service running in the public cloud and need to communicate with different other cloud services or on-premises systems. As network security best practice, in most of the cases the internet access to certain services should be closed and only communication in the internal Azure backbone should be allowed. Azure private endpoints are created to help Azure services to communicate with each other, providing privately accessible IP addresses. A private endpoint is a special network interface for an Azure service in your virtual network. First, let's create a link service to a storage account. Go to the Manage tab, Link Services, and click on New. Search for Data Lake and click on Azure Data Lake Storage GEN2. For authentication, we are going to use the Workspace Managed Identity. Select the subscription and storage account name. The connection failed as expected. We must provide access to the managed identity of the Synapse Workspace to the storage account. For that, navigate to the storage account, click on Access Control, and create a new role assignment for the Storage Blob Data Contributor role. And assign it to the Workspace MI. Now test the connection again. This time it succeeded. For the Azure SQL database, let's do the same procedure. This time search for Azure SQL and select it from the results, then click on Continue. Add the database details. We are using SQL authentication for demo purposes, but it's better to use a managed identity. Re-enable interactive authoring if required. Oops, let me correct the server and database name. Now, if you test the connection, it failed because public network access is denied. Navigate to the server, then to the networking section, and enable access for other Azure services. Now the connection test succeeded. Let's close the public access to the database. For that, go to the networking section in the server, disable public network access and click on Save. Let's do the same for the storage account in its network settings. Click on Disable and then Save. Time to test the link services again. Both connections, the Azure SQL database and the ADLS, should fail. To re-establish connectivity, we are going to create a new Managed by Azure integration runtime. For demo purposes, we can use default values. We will add two private endpoints from the integration runtime to the target services. Go to the Manage Private Endpoint section on the Management tab. We can start with the ADLS. I am selecting the storage account via subscription. Let's do the same for the Azure SQL Database. The endpoints have a provisioning state and an approval state. Someone with the right privileges must approve these endpoints in the correspondent services. For the storage account in the network settings, go to Private Endpoint Connections and approve the pending request. For the SQL database, do the same. Now the private endpoints are provisioned and approved. Since we have enabled communication over a private network, the linked services connection should succeed again. We need to select the correct integration runtime, and you can even see the Manage Private Endpoint in the linked services edit windows, including its approval status. The same occurs for the Azure SQL database. With that, we conclude this demo. I hope you enjoy it.